Hi guys, this is Dave Schade. Sorry we're running a little late. We had technical difficulties. We were rolling and realized we weren't on the air. So we're back. I'm Dave Schade, Director of your Division of Alaska Agriculture. This is our Thursday Facebook. We try to support and show off ag industries around the state. One of those things we decided this winter we're going to try to do, because we spent the summer doing farmers markets and trying to show production and farmers, beekeepers and that, we're going to talk to the ag groups, and we're going to talk about the groups that are out there supporting us on the policy level. And so today I have the honor of having Amy Seitz. She's the Executive Director of the Alaska Farm Bureau with me today. And we got an annual conference coming up. For the record, I am a member, have been for many years, of the Farmers Union, the Farm Bureau, because I think you've got to be involved. Farm Bureau does a great job. And so as with that, I would like Amy to kind of explain what Farm Bureau is, what the Executive Director does, and that, so that people know, who you are and what you're doing. And then we'll talk about some policy issues, and then maybe talk a little bit about your meeting that's coming up.
All right, sounds great. And thanks, Dave, for having me on today. First time doing the Facebook Live with you. So anyway, the Farm Bureau, and I've been in this position since November 2014, so I've been here for a few years now. But the Farm Bureau's mission is to improve the economic well-being and expand agriculture in Alaska. And I think the Farm Bureau, all the other ag organizations, we're all wanting to improve our food system, improve our agriculture. And you mentioned that policy advocacy, that's a pretty big part of what Farm Bureau does. Trying to engage policymakers, working with administration, working with the Division of Agriculture, just promoting agriculture, looking at ways to expand, whether it's expanding the size or bringing in new business. And a lot of that is through educational opportunities, getting to Juneau, enhancing services for our members. And I like to point out one of the important parts of any of the organizations is our membership engagement. So you mentioned that you're a member, you're an engaged member. So I'd just like to point out that we're only as strong as our membership.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So I know you're the Alaska Farm Bureau from Alaska. So maybe you can explain how you're a national organization as well. Your national president, Zippy Duvall, has been on the news a lot lately on a lot of issues. I've not met that's one gentleman I haven't met. I hope to do that one day. So why don't you tell on the national level, what are some of the big issues, and then we'll go back to state.
Well, I'm sure everyone can imagine this year, the big issues were around COVID, the pandemic, and how it impacted agriculture nationally, the processing facilities, having to change the markets a lot, with restaurants closing or slowing down, shifting the processing of agriculture commodities. But just to kind of give a layout of Farm Bureau, we have our local chapters, so people can be engaged at the local level. We have our state Farm Bureau, and then we have the National Farm Bureau, and that setup is consistent in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. So it's a pretty big organization and gives farmers a voice at all of those levels. And this year, we spent a lot of time on meetings and phone calls with Zippy, who's a great leader for the organization. He spent a lot of time with USDA, Secretary Perdue, just fighting to make sure our farmers can still reach markets, trying to resolve the issues with the processing facilities going down, how to adjust the supply chain to make it work and get food to the consumers, and make sure farmers were still being able to make an income and support themselves.
Right. Because I mean, you raise a good point, and people don't realize that, we grow such a small amount of our own food in Alaska. When the national food supply chain starts breaking, we're at the end of the chain, and it's going to affect us. And then you go to rural Alaska, and you're even further out in the food chain. And so, from our perspective, say here at the division, we've watched that, and we've been quite concerned about how that, and people are like, well, it's over. And I'm like, no, this is going to take 5 years. This food supply chain, it's going to take a while to get everything back in sync. Agriculture, I think I made a point on a national call, and it's like, 18 months ago was when that action was taken. Now we're feeling it, and the actions we take today will be shown in 18 months. Did we do it right or wrong? And so that timing, when you're having those national level discussions, they're way down the road, and it's not flip the switch today or tomorrow. So bringing that home, what do you think are the big issues in Alaska right now let's start with the producers. What do you think the big issues are?
Well, I think, each of the different industries, the peonies, the livestock, produce, they have their individual things specific to them. But I think overall, and it's been this way for many years, our lack of infrastructure and developed markets. I mean, we have a long way to go. There's lots of opportunities there, but it will take working together, some investment, but to really see some expansion, building that infrastructure, developing the markets, and we'll need all the small markets, the medium, the restaurants, the large grocery store chains. We'll need all of those markets to really make a significant growth in our industry here.
Right. So we got a few comments. Somebody was asking if we read the comments, and the answer is yes, of course we do. I love to get interaction from our fan base out there. And another one, she goes, I'm a member from New Zealand, aiming to be based in Alaska soon, dairy farmer, 24 years, as well as beef and some sheep experience, hoping I can be more involved once I get there. So, that the exciting part is, I think you've got a huge amount of interest in growing Alaskan agriculture. One of the things that I think is a challenge is going from the very small micro climate we have with our producers and getting into that retail market. And how do we get, I was just off a phone call with FAS, the Foreign Ag Service, and I said, we're teeny weeny niche markets in the international thing, but we have huge potential, as you just said, because Alaska grown, I always say Alaska clean air, clean water, clean soil. This is what we're going to sell. This is where we're going to grow. So what do you see as the key challenges from the Farm Bureau's perspective that we can, as the division, can do to help leverage that?
Yeah, that it's going from the smaller to big expansion. That's, it can be a little frightening. And I think the Division of Ag, working with, whether it's partnering with the other organizations, just educational, a way to help the farmers walk through the steps necessary to make that, what are the rules and regulations? I know it comes up quite a bit, importing livestock into Alaska. We need more animals up here in order for that sector to really grow.
Right.
But if you're going to import a significant number, driving through Canada is the most economical option, but there's the federal rules and regulations. You're going through another country, and then there's the Alaska regulations, and trying to make a easy, comprehensive way for a farmer to meet all those requirements, it can be a little daunting sometimes to work, to know what the rules and regulations are and have a place someone can go and get all the answers.
Right. And actually, it's kind of funny. I was talking to the state vet, Bob Gerlach, the other day about that and how challenging it is on our side to try to fix some of the problems because, it's a federal system. You're going from Canada into the US, which is a USDA requirement. And some of their rules that are established for the lower 48 make perfect sense up there. I've literally made Secretary Perdue a little bit perturbed in one meeting when I told him his programs don't work so good for us. And he didn't like that. And I didn't mean it with disrespect. I'm just saying we're different. And I keep beating that in. And so we're actually talking about some things we can do to maybe help industry along those lines. So, that's definitely a challenge. Since you talked about regulations, I've been talking I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I find that sometimes that industries believe we're a dumping ground. We don't have rules, we don't have regulations, and sometimes we get hammered. If they got an excess, they just drop it into the Alaska market. We don't have the inspectors, the quality control. If you're in Alaska grown, man, we're on you. But if you're just down in the retail market, it seems to impact some of our producers, and we're looking at trying to develop some programs to protect the farmers with regulations. So any thoughts about how, you said good, clear regulations, but maybe are there some that we need to look at?
Which I know you and I have talked some about, the dog food coming in, and some of those things people may not think about, that stuff that's getting shipped in and what it could potentially bring in, invasive species, or, if it's not inspected and make sure that it's safe, making sure that what we bring in, and I know you've looked at the regulations around invasives and fertilizers, we want to make sure what we bring in is safe and not gonna harm our local products. But I think that one of the big things with looking at, and there's good regulation and there's over-regulation, but I think the key, and you did it with the hemp regulations, really reaching out to the stakeholders, the producers, and making sure they understand it, getting feedback.
Oh, good. Yeah. And so we're looking at the next reg package is invasives. It's woefully out of date. So we're looking at running through that. We're going to update some on our seed, because we had to put a potato quarantine in place to protect our local growers, because some states, their regulations say that, if you're sending it out of state as seed, it can have 6% virus. And we're like, no, you're not. And so we did that. The governor and the commissioners are like, yeah, let's not have bad stuff brought into this state and start the disease, because we're disease free. Pet food, another huge issue. Rob Carter and I sat through the national conference. In the last 10 years, there have been 3 outbreaks of where humans were getting sick from pet food. I had no idea that pet food, salmonella poisoning, 3 different cases, kids, and one of it was just handling the food. It wasn't even, the kids eating it. It was just the handling it. And I was like, I didn't even think about food safety issues with pet food. It's a big problem. And then of course we have the issues of, the animals, you get a bad batch and you have a bunch of dead animals, and we have no regs, so we can't even go out and test and prove it was wrong. So we're looking at that one. We're looking at fertilizers and making sure it actually, when it says it's 20 on nitrogen, that when we go and test it, it's got 20. Because we have anecdotal evidence that people is like, well, I used it every year, and then this year I got nothing, and I'm like, yep, bad batch, because we don't test. And I mean, I don't, the whole idea would be, we want to make an even playing field for everybody, because we think our farmers can outcompete anybody. I mean, we really have some advantages. Let's give them that opportunity. So we're going to be looking at that. And of course, I love going to the different annual meetings, which I'm planning on coming down next Friday there in Homer. It looks like you're going to have the meeting. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the annual meeting and what's coming up and what's on your agenda there?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this annual meeting with all the challenges it's been to set it up. And we're doing in-person and virtual options for folks to attend. But we've got some updates, kind of some industry updates, see how the peony growers did this year, how the farmers markets and online sales went this year. But then we're bringing in someone from American Farm Bureau is going to be talking about agriculture and the climate. I don't know if you've saw the EPA report that came out earlier this year on kind of the trends that we're seeing in agriculture emissions and a lot of the conservation efforts that farmers are putting in place. So I'm really excited to see or hear on that topic. And then we have this organization, Center for Food Integrity. They're going to be talking about how COVID has changed consumer expectations and kind of what the trend is in consumer wants, consumer trends. So yeah, really excited on some of these on the topics that we're going to be having at our Friday forum. And then at our annual meeting on Saturday, obviously we set our priorities for the coming year, and that's completely based on what our membership wants us to focus on. But one of the topics we're going to be getting feedback from our members on is our expansion in 2021 to do an annual convention and trade show. So we're really looking forward to making a big push in 2021, bringing in vendors, have kind of like a home show for farmers, and then having a lot more breakout sessions, workshops. So we're really looking at expanding what we do for our annual meeting events.
Well, good. So, and I understand you might have a early morning guest coming on.
Yes, and we are very excited to start Friday morning with the governor addressing our attendees. So yeah, 9:45. We're really excited to have him joining us virtually.
Yeah, I was pretty excited that the governor had agreed to come in, and I definitely, and so far it still looks like I'll bring the mask and come on down, and we'll be talking in the afternoon with the group, because one of the big things that we really believe in is going out and talking to our stakeholders and finding out what's going on, what's working, what's not. So we got a couple of questions here that I'll just read them and then you and I can talk about it. So one question is, how much land and experience do you need to become part of the commercial market? And who's in charge of finding land for agriculture? Those are a couple of questions we got. So
yeah, and that which people ask, how much do I need to sell to be considered a farmer? And depending on what you're looking for, sometimes the rules are different, but an acre or less of land. There are a lot of people who are selling at farmers markets who have less than an acre in production. I mean, it's not the size that matters. So I think you can do a lot on a small piece of property. And then the other one was on land.
Yeah, who's in charge of finding land? Well, that you are. If you want land, you can go find it. But for state land, of course, DNR has its land sales office in the Division of Mining, Land and Water. So go on the website, look there. So they have over-counter the sales and that. The division is looking at the Nantucket project, which will be starting at about 50,000 acres. We got 160,000 acres there in a parcel we're looking at to develop into ag land. Committed to the governor's office that we'll be looking at a first sale in fiscal year 22 is what we're looking at. We've got about 500 acres on the North Fork and Acre Point we're looking at doing some ag sales there. So a year or two down the road on that. So, and then of course there's ag land. There's 85,000 acres of ag land in the state that is in production. Well, it has been cleared for production. We're only using about 35,000 acres of that. So, one of the keys is, of course, building our markets so that we don't drive the prices of our stuff down. So, yeah.
Some other options to look at for land. I know the Kenai Peninsula Borough here has a couple of pilot projects they're doing that will be leasing ag lands. Farmland Trust has their FarmLink program. So, I mean, there's places around to look, but getting affordable land is one of the challenges.
Right. Right. And the USDA says you make $1,000 from your farm, you're a farm. That's the census number. Yeah. And so, And people like, do I have to be large? I was actually running some information. And so I asked staff to look at the size of flower farms nationally and internationally. And I was thinking, okay, flower farms, 100 acres, 200 acres. No, nationally, 5 acres. Internationally, 5 acres. Flower farms are 5 acres, high intense, high yield. And I was shocked. I was like, okay, guys, the question, as you alluded to, how are you going to use that? In the intensity, and what are you going to do? Do you grow wheat on an acre? No, that's not an intense crop. That's a volume crop. But your specialty crops, your foods, some of your flowers, some of your fiber things, there are some of those markets that you don't need a lot. You can grow in greenhouses. Of course, you're not talking acres when you're in greenhouses, and there's a lot of greens and a lot of things that are being grown inside in Alaska. And I think hydroponics and greenhouses and that are going to really grow. I think we have some opportunity down the road to build that industry. So, I think it's the innovation of Alaska in the end. Our farmers are pretty innovative. And so, we look at what's done in the lower 48, as I call it, and then go, hey, that's not a bad idea. We can adapt it and change it and tweak it and make it work. So, like you, I'm pretty optimistic about the future of Alaska and what we can do on our markets and that.
Yeah.
So,
one more comment on the discussion of how much land and
sure.
Not. And you kind of mentioned something about it, but know what you want to do before making the investment. If you have an idea, if you want to be a cattle rancher, you're going to be looking at more than if you want to grow zucchini.
Right.
So yeah, definitely decide what your goal is before making the investment.
Right, and we've been having some discussions on the minimum size of ag covenant land and that. And one of the things I said is you also have to look at a 20-year cycle, a 50-year cycle. If you have a disease and you have to move off of the 5 acres you're using so that you can keep your rotation, I mean, that is a long-term strategy you have to build in. I've told the commissioner many times is like, agriculture is multi-generational. If you're not thinking down the road for generations as you develop, then you're going to run yourself into a roadblock. And that's, where, you started, you're a 3rd generation farmer, right? We take pride in that kind of stuff. I'm, 2nd or 3rd, depends on whether you call grandma and grandpa and mom and dad partnership 1st or 2nd, because they homesteaded in 58 together. Your grandparents were 10 years earlier than that. That's kind of cool. So, but that is where, we come from kind of an established base. The challenge for the new folks is how do you do it all at once? And so, we're looking at some incentive programs from the market side that we're going to try to look at. And, we're definitely looking for ideas and input from all the stakeholders, for all the people that are interested in getting in, people that need to know. I was talking to the Foreign Ag Service about how do we help our folks not get tripped up in international marketing, because some of our peony growers kind of got tripped up the first few years and got conned into sending a separate second shipment for free. And, it's like, people play honest in the US for the largest part. In international markets, maybe not so much, but we have some resources. And so as we continue to focus the division on helping and supporting that development of the markets and the growth of the industry, then those are kind of things that we've actually got offers from the federal government to come in and do some classes on international stuff. Good. And that's kind of exciting when they're willing to take our little teeny neck of the woods and, from ag, we're kind of small, but they think it's important. So yeah, what have we missed? And you can give your pitch, to folks. Do you work? Okay. All right. Before we do that, I guess I missed 2 questions. See, I have so much fun talking with you. So has the market been tapped for sales in regard to other uses for peonies, such as skin creams being made from peony root. They have a wonderful effect on things like eczema, as well as moisturizing creams. And the next one was, do you work and collaborate with some native corporations? So those are both more industry kind of questions. I do know that there's a huge, I wouldn't say huge, there are a lot of tinctured and other kind of folks doing that kind of development. I was really surprised at how much is being done.
Yeah.
I have heard about the peony roots, and actually in some markets it's more valuable than the flowers. That,
yeah, and I would say there's, no matter how many people, how many peony growers are venturing into that, there's still plenty of room to expand that.
The peony market, we have not even scratched the surface. I had a buyer from Canada 2 years ago say, I want a truckload a week for 6 weeks. We don't grow a truckload a week in the entire state. And that's what he wanted. And so the room for expansion in that market and other markets is quite expansive. And people are like, well, you have to grow them, and they came on in April, and I'm like, well, actually, because peonies can be stored for up to 6 months, June and July is when the storage in the world runs out, not when their growing runs out. So if ours come on a little early and we develop the capacity to store, then the market's going to continue to grow. So there's those kind of challenges are coming in. And of course, we work with everybody, the native corporations. We have soil and water districts around the state. We've been talking I'm happy to talk and work with anybody. And I know the farm bureaus in the same manner. So absolutely all in and all of the above, as they say. So with that,
we all eat, we all need to eat. So yeah, we should all be working together.
And food security, I think, has become important. I think we've learned that we don't have the infrastructure we need. I think we've learned that our transportation network is woefully inadequate in certain instances and in certain areas. Communication, I mean, they're pushing rural broadband, and I'm really glad that we got a bunch of USDA money up to support our rural areas, but there's challenges, there's opportunities. And so with that, I always let my guest have the last words or the last comments. So what did we miss? What else do you want?
Well, we could talk agriculture all day and still miss some of the topics, but I just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on here. I look forward to future conversations. And I just encourage everyone, obviously I'd hope people participate in the annual meeting coming up Friday and Saturday, the 13th and 14th, but also look at ways to get engaged and involved in the coming year. Agriculture meetings, if someone wants input, share your thoughts, get involved and engaged.
All right, so tell them how they can get a hold of you. How do they know how to get on Zoom? How do they show up at Land's End and Homer? What do you want to tell people? How do they do it?
Well, right now the easiest way is probably going to our website, alaskafb.org, and either getting on there under the events to get the information, or giving me a call. My number's right there on the website, 252-5064, or email me at amy.seitz@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to send the information. And
that's great. That's what I wanted. I wanted you to give out that information. We always try to go, hey, promote yourself. That's what this is all about. We promote agriculture here at the division. I really want to thank you for taking time. I know you're busy finishing up, getting ready. As always, it's a blast to talk to you. You're a wealth of knowledge, folks. Amy is always a great advocate for ag, great person to talk to. So again, thank you so much for taking your busy time and setting a little bit of it aside for us. So with that, thanks all. Have a great day. We'll be talking to you next week.